All right, welcome to another episode of the MO Zoom Academy. Here with us today is Kirstin Phelps, Associate Site Lead and Market Research Team Coordinator for the AbbVie Innovation Center, and we are super excited to get to talk to her. If we could start out with you telling us a little bit about your background, who you are and where you're from, your college experience, and what you do now.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Hello, everyone listening. I'm Kirstin, as Apollonia had mentioned, and currently work at Research Park at the University of Illinois at the AbbVie Innovation Center, as was mentioned, as an associate site lead there and helping to coordinate our internal student consulting team called the Market Research Team. My background, I have been in Champaign-Urbana since about 2000. I actually grew up in a very small town southwest of here called Blue Mound, Illinois, in Christian County. So, or Macon County, Christian County, back in that area. So, had grown up with Champaign-Urbana being kind of a metropolis, if you will, of my small town of 700 people. In my background, I have 3 degrees, all from the University of Illinois. Happy to talk a little bit about my process behind that. So I did get my undergraduate in communications, agricultural communications, actually, with an emphasis on advertising. So had a lot of classes between Greg Hall and then also on the ag campus. And then I got my master's degree in agricultural education with a focus on leadership. Ended up working here at the University of Illinois at the Illinois Leadership Center, which is at the Illini Union, for about 12 years. And then I decided to kind of switch my career path and decided to go back full time and get my PhD, which I just defended this August in information sciences.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Congratulations. That's so exciting.
Yeah, that's a lot more school than I could handle, I think.
And like class level 25 or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. I love that. Could you tell us a little bit more about your professional background and where you've worked prior to your current role?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you a little bit kind of about where I am now. So I do work for AbbVie, which is a global biopharmaceutical company, headquarters, and they have a lot of locations both around the world, but their main campus is in Lake County. And so the AbbVie Innovation Center is over at Research Park, which is a great entrepreneurship campus that has a lot of different companies that's available to University of Illinois students. And so we have a satellite location there where our center really focuses on leveraging the connections that we have with the university and other universities across the country to source and find really talented students, like Apollonia works with us at the AIC, to work and support different projects with AbbVie scientists and engineers across the organization. So a lot of our students are hired in kind of what you might think of as traditional degree backgrounds like computer science and engineering. We do a lot of data analytics, but we also have teams, like I mentioned before, students who do kind of consulting, and then folks like Apollonia who do a lot of kind of visual design. We have some communications focused interns, some copyright interns, a lot of SharePoint support and mentorship. So in that role, a lot of what I do is help make the center a great place to work. And a really developmental experience for our students. So my day-to-day is focused on a lot of Zoom calls, unfortunately, right now, versus being able to connect in person, but providing coaching and mentorship to our students, and then also helping to support different academic collaborations that we might have, getting speakers to come in from AbbVie to speak to different departments and units at the University of Illinois, and then some of our other partner organizations, and then providing kind of that experience of what it would be to be a student at the AIC. So a lot of social events, professional development events, AbbVie speakers to help get our students up to speed on AbbVie as a company, and then biopharma in general as an industry. So, and before I joined there, I actually joined back in May. So I've been going on almost 7 months, 7 to 8 months working at AbbVie. Before that, I was a professional student for 7 years. So I was getting my PhD full time and did a lot of, teaching assistance. I taught some classes, did some RA appointments, helping to support the research for faculty in our department. And then my main other professional experience was working at the Leadership Center on campus, which if any of the students are familiar with that center, it was doing a lot of facilitation of leadership programs, teaching some undergraduate classes in leadership, and then kind of running day-long to multi-day-long leadership experiences and writing the curriculum for that for our Illinois students.
That's
Yes,
fantastic.
actually, yeah, sorry to cut you off, Matt, but our last interview was with my former boss at the Leadership Center with Marcus, and I
Oh,
also
nice.
worked there too, so it's like a little bit of a connection.
That's awesome, Apollonia.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, we that was a really fantastic interview, and I remember I think we passed off some of the resources from the Leadership Center to our members in Midnight Oil. So we have a good relationship with the Leadership Center. But
Good
I
place.
kind of want to ask you, is that is what you're doing now sort of, how did you kind of so since you've had so much schooling, what was the I guess kind of the layer of each degree that you got? Did you kind of know this is where you kind of wanted to focus? And if not, how did your schooling sort of bring you to where you want it to be?
Yeah, definitely. It was definitely an iterative process. And I think that, anyone who's kind of considering advanced degrees, I think doing a lot of research and talking to folks who are in the degrees, current students, students who've completed, faculty, to really get a sense of it's going to give you what you want. For me, when I was finishing my bachelor's, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to go into. I liked advertising, I liked account management, so I was thinking I was interviewing for some communications manager jobs, and wasn't really excited about any of the interviews that I had. I'd interviewed for like Land's End and AgCo, a couple ag com companies, and some of these positions, and it just didn't feel, I wasn't excited about them. And one of the lucky things that I was able to have was a really great mentors who were looking out for me. I really wasn't sure. And one of my my faculty members was like, you really should think about getting a master's degree. Like, I think education is a really great opportunity for you. And I listened to her and actually applied for and got into the agricultural education master's degree at University of Illinois, which I really liked education. I came into the university being bio pre-med, thinking I would be a doctor, but I really liked the more generalist skill set that a communication degree provided. And I hated chemistry. I loved biology, but I hated chemistry. So I was really excited about the degree, but I wasn't finding positions that really, I felt like, spoke to me in terms of what I like to do and what energized me. And so going to get my MS degree, I thought teaching, or having the opportunity to just do more kind of facilitation and training, and the emphasis on the ed degree was really on informal education. So not necessarily in the classroom, but kind of small groups, group mentorship, and there was a natural leadership component. And I started working almost immediately as a grad student at the Illinois Leadership Center. So as I was going through my degree program and learning about classroom management and curriculum development, I actually was putting that immediately into practice in the graduate roles that I had at the ILC, helping to write and develop curriculum, mentoring undergraduates, etc. After that, I started working there full time. And I came to a realization that, I think as a woman and as a woman in academia, if I wanted to advance an academy, I needed to get the credentialing that would be provided by getting a PhD, particularly if I wanted to teach. And I really was starting to get interested in leadership. Side note, I'm a really big gamer. I love playing video games. And so I was getting really interested in like the leadership lessons that could come from playing, like, I'm going to date myself, but like World of Warcraft and some of these like MMOs, right?
Yes.
So I was doing some research there and thought that it would be fun to actually do that as a career. So I decided to pursue a PhD and did a lot of work on, what fields I wanted to go into. I was reading a lot of in the business administration. So I was looking at psychology. I was looking at sociology, because I thought that would be interesting in me. And again, and this is sort of, for a lesson, I listened to mentors and people who knew me well, who told me to look at, it was called the Graduate School of Library and Information Science at the time, or GISLIS. And so I started to talk to people in that program and realized that the interdisciplinary of that degree, the focus on technology and information, was a really perfect fit for my skill areas. And there was a cool number of faculty members who I really would want to work with, because I was interested in kind of social network analysis and kind of applying some computational methods to social questions. And so I got in and decided, what, if I'm going to make the shift, let's just go full time. So I resigned from my full-time position and decided to join and be a student. And all throughout that degree, I thought I would go into academia. So when I got done and was close to completing, I was on the academic job market. I was doing job talks and visiting different universities, thinking that I was applying for assistant professor roles. And I had a couple options that I was looking at. And then again, I had a couple people who knew me really well say, hey, this position opened up at Research Park. It opened up at Abbey. I think you would be great for it. And I was really taken aback. Number one, there's a good number of folks who have advanced degrees at AbbVie. There's a number of women in leadership positions there. It's a really great company that's very developmental and focused on its employees. And I was really excited about the opportunity to work with students again and, you know, kind of find ways to provide mentorship and really leverage the knowledge that I had of academia in ways that would support really wonderful goals that the company has of improving the lives of their patients. And so I decided to take a pause on academia and withdrew from some of the searches that I was in and took this position at the AIC, and I've been really happy ever since. So very long, convoluted story in terms of career path. You know, but I think that it was really paying attention to folks who knew me well and sort of what my interest areas were, and not being afraid to kind of take a chance on something, even though I feel like, you know, I spent 7 years going to get my PhD, but I'm not in academia, you know, that sometimes feels weird, but I'm still using, you know, the skills that I learned in that process and in my day to day, you know, it's just a little bit of a different inflection of how those are being practiced. So.
That's amazing. Any particular reason that you got all 3 degrees at the U of L?
I have always had a little bit, I know when I was younger, I always was a little leery of that and how that would come across. But everyone that I've spoken to has said that it honestly, as long as it's a good institution, it really doesn't matter. For me, it all came down to very personal reasons. So going from my bachelor's to my master's, I didn't know what I was doing. And I just kind of followed the advice of one of my mentors who knew me very well. And when it came for the decision of going to pursue my PhD, GISLIS was very highly rated. It's one of the top ranked programs in the nation. And honestly, I had a family here, so I didn't have the flexibility to kind of be able to uproot my family and move. So it just happened to be really good that it was a great program with really great faculty, and it was in the town that I was living in. So
nice. It seemed like all the stars aligned for you.
Yes, it was perfect storm. So
I know you've talked about this a little bit, but could you go kind of more into depth on what the AIC is in relation to AbbVie as a whole and your role within that?
sure. So the AIC is a unit within AbbVie that is part of academic partnerships. So the AIC reports up to academic partnerships, which is part of information research. And the information research organization of AbbVie basically supports the R&D process. So if you think about a biopharmaceutical company, R&D is sort of the group that is anything from here's what a molecule is, let's test it out, let's try how it works out in animals, all the way through kind of seeing how that works in humans through clinical trials. And then it also, you know, part of that is the manufacturing side on then how do we take that and then put it into a pill or a syringe or a capsule or whatever. And then also the commercial side, then how do you market the product that comes from that. So IR supports R&D basically through kind of typical sort of tech infrastructure platforms. But then a big part of the IR group within AbbVie is they have these different capability groups. So different teams who help support the work that the scientists and the engineers are doing. So there's like a data solutions group that is doing, you know, a lot of data analytics and creating dashboards so that our scientists who are working in these labs can kind of coordinate and collaborate better. Academic partnerships in the library is one of those capability groups. And so we basically help support AbbVie by using the proximity that we have to the University of Illinois and the relationships that we have with different departments here to help source really great students to work on different projects. We at the AIC, we have about 90 students that we work with at any given semester. We are supporting over 100 projects from across AbbVie. And like I mentioned before, they range from, you know, helping to do some data analysis or some statistical analysis on some program to building a dashboard and doing more front end application work We have a team of students who's doing robotic process automation, which in kind of the business, like the things that take up a lot of manual time but are very repetitive, finding ways to automate emails or forms or things that get sent out so that you can free up that time. And then also teams of students that are working on like Apollonia, kind of helping to support visual elements or finding different iconic assets that if internal units want to share what they're doing in the projects, that they have really great visuals and really great stories that help articulate that across the enterprise. So there's over 48,000 employees worldwide with AbbVie. So it's a very large organization. And so there's a lot of communication needs, as Apollonia probably can tell you, to help make sure that folks kind of know what's going on. So
Yeah, I know there's always a between AAF and the U of I student body and AbbVie. There's a great relationship there, and I know that I always hear about AbbVie, but I forget how massive they are as just a company in general. So it's crazy. It's funny that you say that. But what would you say? I guess after hearing all that, what is sort of your favorite aspect or favorite part of the job that you're working now, the position that you have?
yeah. This is my first time in pharma, so it's new to me. And I will say I've been really impressed. So a couple things. One, I've been impressed by how nice and kind and developmental everyone is. So everyone that I've had a contact with, and I onboarded remote, so I haven't physically met a lot of my colleagues. But everyone's been very helpful. And I think in general, the principles, AbbVie has a number of behavioral principles that guide the ways that they work. And that really is how the entire organization really focuses themselves. And so, we really want, if we've got good people, we want to keep good people. And so I've been really impressed by everyone being, willing to share their experiences, meet with folks, really caring about what you want to get out of your position and where your growth goals are. I've really enjoyed connecting with the students. So we are very unique in that regard across AbbVie. And that's something that we're known for. A lot of our colleagues who are project leads for some of the teams that our students work on talk about how great it is to be able to work with students. I think, being here on campus, you might take it for granted of the energy that comes, with kind of being on a college environment. But a lot of our colleagues want to come and visit the center because they want to kind of relive and re-get that energy that comes from working with students. And then also just the variety. It's very interesting for me to kind of learn more about this industry and all of the different ways in our therapeutic areas and how we're helping folks through the devices and our medicines, and everyone cares about that, no matter sort of what the level is. Like that is very front of mind for everyone that I've spoken to. So it's been very kind of eye-opening to get that perspective about pharma as well, and just the variety of roles. I think a lot of our students who we hire come from a computer science background, and a lot of them wouldn't think that you have so many opportunities for development, for example, outside of kind of the Silicon Valley and the big tech, but there's a lot of possibilities there, and a lot of possibilities around communication too. I mean, we've got a number of students who work on SharePoint, who have internal messaging. There's a lot of that, the need for that in big organizations to help keep everybody aware of what's going on, from social media to kind of visual design to the commercial side where you're actually working on a particular product. There's just a lot of variety. So that's been really fun to learn all the new acronyms and figure my way around this really big organization.
I think it's so interesting that you mentioned onboarding remotely. I don't think that we've ever been able to interact in person. It's such a
No,
strange world that we live in. I've only been to the AIC office a handful of times, so I was wondering if you could go into more detail about maybe your typical day and how has COVID impacted that?
sure. I mean, I think one of the things, and you all can probably attest to this too, that a lot of the interaction that might come organically, through a student organization or walking through the halls of the quad, now has to be scheduled. So that probably is the biggest change for me, and thinking about if we were all in the center in Research Park, it would be very easy just to kind of touch base with, a whole bunch of students and, just checking how they're doing, how their projects are going. Now that's all relying upon, trying to coordinate schedules and finding 30 minutes to meet over Zoom. So that's been a little bit different, and probably a little, adds to maybe some of the Zoom fatigue that I think we all are feeling. But I think that, on a day-to-day, my work, it really varies. It's a lot of organizational meetings. So, just getting information from different groups across AbbVie and how the AIC might be able to support them, or if there's a student that could help with their project. A lot of connecting with students, and then as I coordinate our market research team, we have a number of projects that are going on any particular time during the semester, and so it's also just a lot of sort of project management work and mentorship to help support the students on those teams and the projects that they're working on. So a lot of variety. It's a very fast pace, which I don't mind actually. It keeps the days pretty short. So
Nice. Yeah, kind of going off of that, I have a question regarding employee morale. I know COVID has brought a lot of struggles with that. So I was wondering if you had any tips or tricks to keep employee morale high.
sure, yeah. And I think one of the things that I'm practicing myself is really, and I mean, it's been COVID, it's been, the protests this summer, it's been, political, social things that have been happening. There's just been a lot this year. And we know that it's a lot, and folks may be feeling, isolated in various ways just because, we don't have the same ability to connect with our social networks the way that we have. How we've been handling it and how I've been handling is really just trying to allow space to be kind to yourself. Trying to encourage. We actually just had a chat and chill this morning, just a no scheduled stop by as you're able with our students. And, we're talking about the importance of drinking water and staying hydrated, right? And taking a walk in between meetings and still being able to kind of get out, and just, listening to yourself and trying to just make space to know that it can be more exhausting in different ways. Particularly if you're sitting in the same location and you're not seeing anybody and you're just going from Zoom meeting to WebEx to whatever. In terms of what we've been doing, and I think we've been doing it pretty well, and maybe I can put this back on Apollonia, I think we've done a really good job of just, connecting as people with our students. I mean, we try to do a combination where we realize the semester is crazy, so we don't want to over program people. But we also want to let them know that we're available. So we did small things like having a care pack where we sent everybody, tea and instant hot cocoa and cider and chapstick and some halls and socks, and just be like, hey, we're thinking about you, stay warm. This fall, we've had a lot of fun, different social events where we play games over lunch. So, just stop by as you can. We play Pictionary or charades. We've played Among Us, which I don't know that game, so that was a new introduction to me. And then we've also done some fun things, like we had an Exotic pizza taste off. So we had folks sign up and then we just sent them a pizza and you had to open and eat it online and kind of tell everyone else what you thought about it. And so just little fun things like that we try to do to just let our students know that we're here, and that we hear them and that we see them. And that we hope that we provide a space, whether that's remote or, right now or in person, hopefully later in the spring or the summer, depending on how things go, that, they can come and be themselves and get an opportunity to connect with other people authentically.
Yeah, absolutely. That is sort of the most challenging part, is kind of, getting to know your fellow workers and people that you're working with, just because, like you said, and that's a really good point that I hadn't thought of before, is like every organic, kind of interaction that you would have has to be scheduled, or, or you're texting or something, which is, it's not the same thing. So that's a really great point. But kind of continuing on with the theme of advice and students and stuff, as for college as a whole, what is I guess a thing or multiple things that students don't take advantage of enough when they're in college?
Sure. Well, I know for me, I don't know if one of the questions that you had sent over, my biggest regret is that I never studied abroad. And I made up for that when I was a graduate student, and basically spent my entire stipends traveling whenever I could. But I think that, number one, first and foremost, is there are a lot of resources available to you as students, and it can be really overwhelming to kind of navigate your way through it. But I think taking advantage of study abroad opportunities, of, some of the opportunities that are available to work on campus through the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, the Career Center, the Leadership Center. There's the Counseling Center. They have really great workshops and programs. The ARC, you can learn how to cook, healthy in their kitchen. There's just a lot of great resources that are available to you. And I think just finding ways to kind of get outside of your comfort zone and just meet other folks, are really, really beneficial for long term. And the big thing that I will say for that too is get to know your TAs and your professors. I think any more in the world that we live in, social networks and your social connections and having people who know you. I mean, I feel like I'm where I am because there are folks who were my mentors who knew me and said, you should look at this department, you should look at this position, you should, think about this. And so you need to foster those relationships and folks who can provide guidance and advice. And I think sometimes students might feel a little weird going into professors' office hours. But having been an instructor, like it's really great when people show that interest and want to talk to you. And particularly when it comes time for, needing letters of recommendation or whatever that is. No one likes the random letter from someone who you've only seen in class but have never had a conversation with. That's a really hard place to put someone in. And oftentimes you won't get a letter because of that. So I think, also just making those connections with faculty is really, really important as well. I think that answered your question, hopefully.
Yeah. Some really good advice. I guess going off of that, do you have any tips that maybe we could implement as a club or just going forward for maybe younger members that are in this weird college Zoom sphere, like how to foster successful social connections with friends or even professors when everything's so online?
Yeah, and I really feel for kind of, the seniors, the world that you're going in is going to be different. I hope there's some hope there. And I know that it seems like there are companies that are kind of starting to pick up hiring and internships again. For the freshmen who their college experience is really, really strange. And I mean, it's such a weird and different place. And I think, for clubs that are looking to kind of engage with their members, I think this is really great, the resources that you all are putting together, finding meaningful ways for people to feel like they're contributing. And I think never underestimate the importance of just, and in person, this was always important as well. And it's one of those things when you kind of get into standard business that you might forget. It's sort of like the relationship building and having people call out their names. But I know every time that we get together with our student group at the AIC, we always do a quick round of introductions and fun ways for people to introduce themselves, and finding ways to celebrate online, so even if it's just kind of getting together and doing, there's a lot of different opportunities to watch a movie together or just to eat together, even if you're kind of online. But I think just providing space for folks to feel like they're making an authentic connection is going to be really important. And finding ways to do that in smaller groups so that people actually feel like they can kind of talk, is also important as well, I think. So just a few.
That's awesome.
Thoughts. Yeah.
So helpful. Thank you so much. I'm definitely going to take those into account. I know we can definitely benefit from that, and we want our members to get the most out of this experience. So we're trying our best. So that's definitely helpful. One last question on my end. Is there any advice you have for students entering the job market in the spring of 2021 amidst all this craziness? What are your advice, tips, tricks?
Yeah, a couple things that I had written down when I was reflecting on this. So, I think that some of these are general, and not necessarily specific to folks who are entering the job market. I think for those of you who are entering the job market, making those connections and not being afraid to kind of schedule and reach out and just do a lot of informational interviews. And sometimes, the important thing, and this is what we tell our students who are looking to, who are working with us now and wanting to continue with AbbVie, is just making connections with no motive besides just learning about what someone's role is and just sharing kind of your interests. I have never experienced someone who I have generally reached out to and just kind of wanted to make a connection with and asked for, referral of someone else to talk to or help with, some piece of advice, no one has really ever told me no. And so I think that, if you have an area that you're interested in or a company you're interested in, using LinkedIn or some of the social networking sites to find a connection, and then just scheduling time to just get to know them a little bit more, and understand a little bit more about the company, and just learn maybe some of the ropes in terms of, how could you maybe start networking a little bit more. Having, I think, an online presence, particularly for those in communication who are more on the creative side, and having a really nice portfolio is going to be important. And I think, as you get into positions where you are interviewing, one of the things that I've noticed, at least in the role that I've been in, is we have a lot of folks who need technical skills and specifics. And being able to, though, not just be able to answer some basic questions about whatever your domain is, but to be able to walk the interviewer through your thought process. As an employer, there are skills that can be taught. And then there are skills and ways of being that can't be taught. And I would rather invest time and money on someone who has initiative, has curiosity, has solid critical thinking skills, and then upskill and train them on something specific that's needed for a job, than having someone come in with that skill that's needed, but doesn't understand the holistic view, or can't articulate or communicate appropriately. So as you're going through interviews, I think practicing and how to share your thought process, even if you don't know the answer, it's really important to just share how you would approach a problem, or the different ways that you would think about it, because that's going to help give folks a cue in terms of what you're bringing to the table and how you would be contributing to that team or that group. So, sometimes don't get hung up if you don't know the perfect answer. Sometimes just being able to articulate and talk through how you might approach it, or some things that you would consider, be thinking about, would be just as important. And then the only other thing that I might share that I know I have always struggled with, and it's kind of a love-hate relationship, especially with like Instagram and like all these like self-help focuses, like everyone always tells you to find your passion. I have never had a passion, and I have always felt horrible about that, like I'm deficient in some way. And I think that there's a lot of jabber and talk right now about like, being able to articulate your brand and your passion. And I would say that's great for folks who have that. And for people who feel like maybe they don't be afraid to just know what you're good at and what you enjoy doing. It doesn't have to be something that you absolutely love or feels like a calling, but if you have a good self-assessment of what you can contribute and what you bring to a team, and the things that are enjoyed and that fulfill you, don't be scared away if you feel like you don't have a quote unquote passion. I think that sometimes I know I have felt bad in certain ways, and that I haven't kind of had that calling. And I think that there's probably a lot of people who are like, well, no, I enjoy doing this and I'm pretty good at it. I don't hate it. But it's not like I would choose to be doing it necessarily if I had like my my choice. But don't be put off by that. Just spend some time with some self-reflection. There's some really great tools. I've always liked Strengths Finder and Strengths Quest and some of these like assessments and sort of different ways, just to provide, not like they're going to give you the definitive answer of who you are, but I think that they're really helpful to kind of put a mirror up and have a little bit of a reflection, and to think about some of the things that you are good at, and that things that you can contribute to. So those would be some general tips that I would probably give that would apply to anyone, not just maybe those who are kind of on the job market. So.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I resonate deeply with what you're saying. Honestly, there's a lot of those people who are like, just follow your dreams, your passion. This, like you said, but it's like you kind of feel lost. You're like, well, maybe I'll just figure it out myself. But really, there's so many people who are like that. So I really appreciate you just kind of speaking about that. But yeah, it's been just a fantastic, absolute pleasure to speak with you, Kirstin, and get to know you and get to know your story a little bit. Yeah, thanks just so much for your time and for speaking with us today.
Yeah, it was wonderful. I think this is a really great, I mentioned before, kind of service that you provide. And, I'm happy for anyone who would like to speak. I can talk about If anyone's considering advanced degrees or if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out. But it's been wonderful to spend time with each of you as well. And best of luck as you start this semester
Yes.
and get through the next couple months. So
Thank you so much.
yeah,
Thanks so much.
thank you. All right. Have a good night, everybody. Thank
See
you.
ya.
You too.
Bye.